In 1543, a Polish astronomer named Nicholas Copernicus first proposed that the sun, not the earth, was at the center of the solar system. This might be an idea that you take for granted, but it's proven to be one of the most revolutionary ideas in all of history. Copernicus's ideas were not well received, but over time, more and more people began to be convinced that he was right, until finally, an astronomer named Galileo Galilei built a primitive telescope and proved that Copernicus was right. The sun was at the center of the solar system. Finally, another astronomer named Johannes Kepler formulated the laws of planetary motion. This meant that for the first time in human history, we could accurately predict ahead of time the way that the planets would move in the heavens. Our theories now began to objectively match the observations we made in the real world. Nothing would ever be the same. This heliocentric model, heliocentric meaning the sun is at the center of it, was extremely revolutionary. For the first time, humans began to understand the way the universe actually worked using something called the scientific method. Scientists could now use data and observations to come to accurate conclusions about the scientific laws governing the universe. We could use this knowledge to build technology, and using technology, we could bend the laws of nature to our will. This scientific revolution, as it came to be known, happened by going against thousands of years of unquestioned wisdom. It happened by going against the authority of the Catholic Church, as seen in the example of Galileo. And so people began to question and mistrust authority in a way perhaps never seen before. People began to lose trust in tradition and ancient wisdom. They wanted to find new ways of coming to know that something was true. This discussion of trying to find new ways of uncovering truth leads us to a man named Francis Bacon, an English thinker who was born in 1561. He was alive at the same time as Kepler and Galileo. When Kepler mathematically proved heliocentrism, he did that by rebelling against the astronomical ideas of Aristotle. And if Kepler went against the astronomical ideas of Aristotle, Bacon went against the philosophical ideas of Aristotle. Aristotle was primarily interested in the natural world, but he still used general ideas and principles. He used reasoning to try to understand the natural world. Bacon rejected this. He believed that the way to understand the natural world was very simply through the knowledge that comes through the five senses, through data and observation. The idea that knowledge about the natural world should come through measurable results that you can observe for yourself is an idea called empiricism. A scientist, according to Bacon, should focus on observing the natural world as closely as he or she could. Data should be collected through those observations, and then experiments could be performed based on the data that was gathered. After enough experiments and data were done, then a scientist could come to a reasonable conclusion about how the natural world worked. Does this sound familiar? Today, Bacon is remembered as one of the primary thinkers who helped develop what we now call the scientific method. Since ancient times, people believed that knowledge made you a better person. Aristotle deeply believed this. But Bacon more believed that knowledge made you powerful. Knowledge is power. And so for Bacon, philosophy should be useful. It should help you concretely build a better world. And through the knowledge generated through the scientific method, we have been able to create technologies that have made life unimaginably easier and more convenient than our ancestors could have imagined. Part of the reason why Bacon helped develop the scientific method is because at the time Bacon was frustrated with philosophy. He was skeptical of its usefulness. It didn't seem to actually make you a more powerful person. He felt like it relied too much on tradition and ancient ideas. He believed that the modern world needed a purification of thought. We need to refresh the way that we looked at the world. And he believed that the best way to do that was to look at it directly, not clouded by the vision of ancient people, but directly through the information you perceive through the five senses. This idea that knowledge comes through the senses and not necessarily through reason. The idea that knowledge can be measured with numbers is called empiricism. Empiricism is not about tradition or scriptures. It's not about what you assume to be true or what your ancestors told you was true. It's about what can be observed, what can be measured, using information that comes directly through the five senses. It's about information that can be replicated by other scientists. Today, empiricism is at the bedrock of most scientists' understanding of the way the world works and the way in which we should generate new scientific knowledge. But arguably even more than Bacon, perhaps no other thinker is more influential to our way of looking at the world and our way of understanding science than a man named Rene Descartes. Descartes was born in 1596 in a town in France that is now named after him in his honor, Descartes. During the 1600s, which was the time in which Descartes lived, people began to mistrust authority in a way that perhaps they never had before. The Catholic Church had lost a lot of its authority in people's minds because of its fight against people like Galileo. Kepler and Bacon had revolutionized our ideas about the universe and astronomy because they were willing to question the authority of Aristotle, something that had gone unquestioned for 2,000 years. In other words, the West was newly skeptical. Europeans were also more exposed to other cultures and religions than perhaps ever before, because during this period, Europeans were sailing around the world and being introduced to other ways of life for the first time. Nothing felt fixed or certain anymore. Even the Earth was no longer the center of the solar system. How could you know anything for sure? For this reason, Descartes expressed a deep skepticism in his philosophy. How could you know anything for certain? Descartes wanted to find out if such a certainty was possible. Descartes started out on his skeptical quest by doubting everything. And when I mean everything, I mean everything. For example, how do you know that your life isn't just a dream? People like Elon Musk will say that the whole world is a simulation. Everything can be doubted, even your own mind, your memories, your life. And so that's how Descartes started out, by doubting absolutely everything. But the more he began to examine what he could and could not know for sure, He realized that there was one thing that he knew for sure, one thing that could not be doubted. Descartes knew that he existed. This was the basis of his philosophy. Descartes summarized his conclusions like this. He started with a first premise, a first thing that seems to be true. Anything that is thinking exists. Then he brought in a second premise, a second thing he knew that was true. I am thinking. So if you start with anything that is thinking exists and I am thinking, it brings you to an unescapable, unquestionably true conclusion. I exist. Because anything that is thinking exists, and because Descartes is thinking, Descartes exists. He summarized this in a Latin phrase called cogito ergo sum. It translates to, I think, therefore I am. Perhaps you've heard that phrase before. No matter how doubtful or skeptical you are, the one thing that you absolutely cannot doubt is the fact of your own existence. You know that you exist. But why is that such a powerful idea? Why has it become so famous? Well, the idea that anything could or should be questioned created a deep skepticism in Western civilization. Suddenly, religious authority could be doubted. The rule of kings and queens could be doubted. Even other scientists and great thinkers could and should be doubted. In Descartes' philosophy, the world became split in two. On the one hand, there was the human mind with its God-given ability to reason. And on the other hand, there was the entire natural world, devoid of reason. And Descartes believed that the natural world could best be understood as a machine. For that reason, Descartes said that the best way to understand the world was through the use of mathematics. God gave humanity its ability to reason so that it could use that reason to understand the mechanical, mathematical world. Everything around us could be understood through the power of our reason. Descartes' ideas changed the world forever. It enthroned human reason as the greatest authority in the world. It also expressed a deep sense of skepticism, the idea that authority could and should be challenged. This is a huge part of the scientific endeavor. Often, science doesn't progress by trying to prove something right. Often, it progresses by trying to prove something wrong. This skepticism continues to be a hallmark of our modern scientific civilization right up until this day.
This concludes Lesson 7 of Big Ideas Throughout History.